Mayor Walsh recently raised the bar on the city's goal for housing production from 53,000 units by 2030 to 69,000 to explain the shift in housing policy and how it responds to concerns about displacement is the housing policy manager for the Boston Planning and Development Agency, Tim Davis. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here.
Tim, I want to talk about what's driving this raising of the bar, and that's the population of Boston. I mean, how much bigger is it getting?
The city's population is growing faster than we anticipated. In 2014, when we first established this plan, we anticipated that the population would grow to about 709,000 by 2030. The BPDA research staff working with the Mass Association of Massachusetts Metro Area Planning Council, MAPC, their research staff have identified that, in fact, we are growing faster than we anticipated and that we could reach 760,000 by 2030.
Back in the 1950s, we had more people than you expect in 2030, but household sizes were different. I'm sure they're quite a bit bigger on average.
They were quite a bit bigger, yes.
So what about the household sizes we're expecting in the future?
Household sizes I think, were around 2.5 in 2010. It's crept up a little bit to about 2.6. I don't see that household sizes are going to increase dramatically. We are bringing more studios, one bedrooms to the marketplace, which is meeting a demand for single individuals and other smaller households. That some of them are doubled up now, so I think it will probably remain the same.
And of course, one thing the city did recently, it changed its policy, at least for a pilot program, on a flexible kind of household. Explain how this is supposed to work. The compact units, I think?
Right. It's called the compact unit policy. This was a recognition of the fact that we have some developers who are already bringing to us smaller units than we traditionally have allowed. It also provides a way for the city, through our design staff and through other city agencies, to actually sit down with a developer and make sure that when we get these smaller units, that they are adequately designed to make sure that they are habitable, that they're livable, and that there's also adequate amenity space for the residents of the building, so that if they're not living as much in their unit, that there's places from their building for other joint programming, etc. In exchange, we're hoping that most of these will be near transit-oriented development sites and would we would be relieved of some of the parking requirements for the building.
And I guess one other feature is that the residents of these buildings would not be eligible for parking stickers, so they're not going to get cars.
No. So that's the goal: is that they wouldn't be eligible for parking stickers. They might not be parking at the building, so these would be people who would choose to live in the city and not have a car.
Another big number for Boston over the past 25 years is that we've lost something like 15,000 middle income or middle class households.
Yep.
How does this new policy, a revised policy, address that?
Well, the compact unit policy is just one policy in a suite of things that we're trying to do to make sure that middle-income households still have a place to be in Boston. It's also by encouraging development in outer neighborhoods where the natural prices are accessible to middle-income households. It's also the program I work with most, which is the inclusionary development policy, which those are income-restricted units, but many of them are affordable more to middle-income households.
And we say middle income, of course, we're talking, what kind of range, let's say, maybe for a family of four or something like that?
Well, generally we think of middle income as households with incomes up to $125,000. We don't necessarily say, well, that's 4 people or 3 people, but it's sort of the range of $50,000 to $125,000 is the range of incomes that we consider middle income.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Tim Davis from the Boston Planning and Development Agency. Tim, when you build more housing, sometimes it reduces the cost of other housing around it, but there are certain neighborhoods, there are certain hot spots where new development, at least it coincides with an increase in the neighborhood around it as well. How do you deal with that other kind of rippling out increase?
Right. So we know that from a regional perspective, increasing the housing stock will help to alleviate rents in the existing housing stock. When it comes to the very specific neighborhood level, it's hard to tease out the difference between whether those rents are going up because they're next to a subway stop, or it's because they're next to a new development, or there's other amenities that are being brought to the neighborhood. But it doesn't change the fact that rents are going up in some hotspots in the neighborhood. And so one of the things that we included in the update of the plan is the 1,000 homes program, which is where the city would actually be actively purchasing with nonprofits 1,000 units of existing housing that's not currently income restricted and income restrict those units. And that obviously means that they would be working, the city would be working hand in hand with the tenants of those buildings to make sure that they are not displaced during this process, but that they can actually benefit from that income restriction.
Now, at first it sounds like it's going to require a lot of money, but I guess this also generates income too. So how does it work financially?
It'll cost a considerable amount of money, but what we see is that by buying existing housing is actually cheaper than us spending money on creating new income-restricted affordable housing because of the construction costs and things like that. So it actually could save the money, save the city some money, but it's not necessarily a big generator of additional income.
Another thing here, and I know this is not strictly a housing issue, but there are neighborhoods where there is pushback on some transit-oriented housing. I'm thinking of Reedville lately, and a lot of concerns there about traffic. I've tried driving through there already. It's pretty congested.
Yeah, I don't work on the transportation issues directly, but I think that is something that our staff works closely with the developers and the community on. We do have a Alston-Brighton mobility study going on right now, which is meant to address the pressures on the transit system and the transportation system in general in Alston-Brighton. So those are the kinds of things that our agency does in neighborhoods to kind of look at what's happening in terms of development and see what adjustments need to be made either to the existing road network or in terms of other transit options.
Of course, you mentioned the 1,000 homes program, but what about leveraging city-owned land to get more affordability and maybe other community benefits as well?
Well, the city has already released a significant amount of land over the last 4 years to projects that have affordability built into them. But we are further committing to that and making sure that we're releasing projects with, 2/3 affordable, maybe in many of them. While we do have both the BPDA and the Department of Neighborhood Development do have parcels, the number of those parcels isn't as significant as in some other cities. So while this is a tool that we're going to be using, it's not the only answer to increasing the affordability in the city.